walks onto stage. Good whatever, lady and gentlemen. The Piano was released in 1993. It is a tale based in the mid-Victorian era. Ada is a mute, single mother, pianist, who is betrothed by her father to frontiersman Alastair Stewart, who lives on the other side of the world. Ada's daughter, Flora, and Ada's piano are shipped to the wilderness of New Zealand to start a new life with her arranged husband. Ada and Flora are left alone on a wind-swept beach to await Alastair. Ada never speaks, and her narration voice is that of a 6-year-old girl. Buckle up, as this be hardcore female fetish pornography. Almost forgot. Spoilers. Smirks. Ada's lack of speech is chosen. That is, she is not physically or mentally mute. Ada chooses to communicate using sign language, which only her preteen daughter, Flora, understands. Ada carries a pen and notepad locket around her neck in case Flora is not around. She wears a black Victorian dress throughout the movie, under which she wears white cotton thermal garments. The two girls behave more like sisters than mother and daughter, suggesting that Ada birthed Flora quite young, maybe even as young as Flora, on the cusp of puberty, when emotions are at their strongest, untempered by experience or logic. The two girls wait on the beach for a day and a night, until Alastair dryballs, and the local native men arrive to guide them to Alastair's small holding. Smirks. It is clear from their arrival that the piano was an unexpected item in the baggage area. The piano plays a major part in Ada's life. Leaving it behind is a torment to her. But leave it behind they must, as there are simply not enough men to carry it and her belongings. Pauses. Alastair is surprised how small Ada is, and attempts to make the best of the situation. The journey through the forest is long and tiresome. New Zealand is relatively damp, and it rains a lot. Ada is briefly introduced to the locals and George Baines, Alastair's business partner, before Alastair has to go away on business, leaving Ada to beg Mr. Baines to take her to the piano so she can play. Mr. Baines sees that Ada really needs to play the piano and ends up taking her and Flora back to the beach to spend the remains of the day playing the piano, dancing in the wind, and making shell pictures. It is at this point the movie begins to deviate from a straightforward frontier's tale into hardcore female fetish pornography. The story of seduction is something both sexes can get behind. The affair with a married woman is less universal. The introduction of payment, preteen voyeurism, and cuckoldry kick the piano into the long grass of hardcore pornography. However, tastefully done or not done, I shall therefore place this part of the story into a black box and bury it somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Let us, gentle souls, focus on the seduction of Ada by Mr. Baines. Pauses. Mr. Baines decides to retrieve the piano from the beach, having seen how much joy Ada and Flora gain from it. Mr. Baines pays for the piano, giving Alastair some land in return for ownership. With the piano in his shack, Mr. Baines has it tuned and asks Ada if she would teach him to play. Sighs. A real gentleman would have gifted the piano to Ada there and then. However, George Baines is no gentleman. Neither is Alastair Stewart. And Ada becomes entrapped in a love triangle, or should that be a sex triangle, as both men appear to want just sex at the start of their liaisons with Ada. Looks left. After some time, both Ada and Mr. Baines feel a little more than an animal need for gratification. Looks right. Mr. Baines admits he just wanted to listen and watch Ada play, offering Ada the piano back, one key at a time, if she performed certain tasks, and allowed him to touch her. Pauses. Music can play a part in seduction, and Mr. Baines is seduced by Ada's love of music, as Ada is seduced by Mr. Baines' slow physical seduction. A striptease spread over many weeks, until the sexual tension becomes too much for Mr. Baines, and he is forced to do the decent thing and give Ada the piano, admitting the arrangement as prostitution. I am giving the piano back to you. I've had enough. The arrangement is making you a whore, and me wretched. I want you to care for me, but you can't. Pauses. Most women would have been happy to have what they wanted. Not Ada. Continues. Ada, I am unhappy because I want you, because my mind has seized on you and thinks of nothing else. This is how I suffer, I am sick with longing. I don't eat, I don't sleep. If you do not want me, if you have come with no feeling for me, then go. Pauses. Without the piano, Ada has nothing but her body to quench Mr. Bain's desires. Unfortunately, Ada is married, and her husband is more than aware of the affair. Alistair makes Ada promise not to see him again. Yet, she must tell Mr. Baines that she loves him some way. Ada fashions a note, a key from her piano, etching the words, "Dear George, you have my heart. Ada McGrath." Ada wraps this in linen, and asks Flora to take the package to Mr. Baines. Pauses. At this point the child makes the decision to hand the package to Alistair, rather than Mr. Baines. A decision that results in the end of the arranged marriage. Alistair's behavior mimics the play that the local natives reacted so badly to earlier. To a lesser extent. Dramatic pause. Mr. Dryballs is a fiend, cutting off one of Ada's fingers and threatening to cut them all off, one by one, if she dares to see Mr. Baines again. With the new couple's love for one another exposed, and the husband found to be a fiend, the marriage is annulled. Mr. Baines, Ada, Flora end up back on the beach, where she landed, in the howling wind. With the piano loaded, they paddle off to Nelson, a nearby town. On the journey, Ada formulates a plan to kill herself. She tells Flora to tell Mr. Baines to cut the piano loose, as it makes the canoe unstable. She says, throw it overboard. She doesn't want it. She say it's spoiled. After some discussion, they cut the ropes fastening the piano to the canoe, and it slowly sinks. As the piano sinks, Ada places her foot into a coil of rope attached to the piano, and is dragged overboard and down into the depths of the waters. The film could have ended there, and given an even more somber tone to the tale. And possibly, it might have, if American audiences were able to cope with melancholy. Pauses. Ada chooses life, and releases herself from the piano. Her shoe, rather than herself, follows the piano down to its watery grave. The ending monologue sums up the writer's style nicely. George has fashioned me a metal fingertip. I am quite the town freak, which satisfies. I am learning to speak. My sound is still so bad, I am ashamed. I practice only when I am alone, and it is dark. At night, I think of my piano in its ocean grave, and sometimes of myself floating above it. Down there everything is so still and silent that it lulls me to sleep. It is a weird lullaby, and so it is. It is mine. This is all spoken in a child's voice. Sighs. As noted earlier, the outline given ignores most of the antagonism within the story, along with fetishistic voyeurism of other people's pleasure and pain. The core love story is more than sufficient. Flora's perspective is never really explored. Interactions with other characters are never fleshed out. In spite of this, the film was acclaimed. And to be honest, for the time it was made, it was unique. Artists can be confused and erratic in their liaisons. The sudden desperation of the situation Ada finds herself in might lead her to suicide. We were never told much of the incident that led to Flora's conception, or the years that led up to her betrothal to Alistair Stewart. Clearly Ada's presence was not wanted back in Scotland. Perhaps a life with Mr. Baines was worse than death. A final humiliation, with her ending monologue pertaining to her passion for musical composition limited to the lullaby of an imagined death. Had Mr. Baines rescued the piano for Ada, rather than his self-gratification, Ada might have lived peacefully alongside him, with her husband, Mr. Dryballs. The main problem with the main characters are their immaturity, and their inability to express themselves with one another. Pauses. For me the story is one of romance. The seduction of Ada, akin to the time. Had Ada not been married, and the husband not watched their coupling, it would have been less fetishistic. Ada is plain and asexual, which makes the reason for the men fighting over her hard to believe. Ada does not flirt with them, the men simply desire her. She never cooks, cleans or converses with either man to any extent. This makes the piano a woman's fantasy, where a living doll is all that men desire, with a woman able to decide whichever man or both to couple with, without having to lift a finger other than exist. Pauses. The realization that this is not the case becomes apparent to Ada in the brutal severing of her finger, the way she falls to the ground in the mud and her skirt balloons, then deflates, is symbolic to her newfound despair. Pauses. Awards are not a clear marker of how entertaining films are. Jane Campion, who cobbled the piano together, won Best Original Screenplay. Holly Hunter, who played Ada, won Best Actress for her mute performance. Anna Paquin, who played Flora, won Best Supporting Actress. It was Anna Paquin's first film. She was 11 at the time. Anna Paquin went on to play Rogue in the X-Men films. Rogue was the mutant who sucked the life force out of other mutants. Smirks. The Piano is labeled as a feminist film. How is Ada equal? She is passed from male to male like a parcel being unwrapped. The only agency Ada had was in her love of music, which was granted to her by men. The Piano contains female fetish pornography. That is all. Peace, I am out of here, word up. Exits stage left.